Welcome to The Celebration, a place for leadership, inclusion, and expression. Let's snap it up for living the best version of ourselves. Welcome. I am Tom Earl. So pleased and grateful for you to be joining us this week in The Celebration. With me, I have one of the most amazing artists, one of the most welcoming, brilliant, engaging. He goes by the name of Mo Man. What's going on, Mo Man?
Man, loving life. Honored to be on the show. Thank you much.
My pleasure. It's truly an honor to be with you. I remember when I first went to Southern Fried, the first person that Ben B, he was my ambassador, and he, my bridge, and he's like, you got to meet Mo Man. You're good if you meet Mo Man. You just gave me a big hug, and I was like, okay, this is going to be great.
I believe in the power of the vouch. Absolutely, man. I believe in the power of the vouch. Bees are all the way good, dude, man.
So I'm looking at your bio on paper, which is amazing. I'm wondering, how do you describe yourself when somebody says, who's Mo Man? What do you use to describe who you are?
So yeah, so a couple of things. Poet, spoken word activist, human being, intersectionalist, father. Those are the things that resonate in this moment. Like as I attempt to define who I am, with a nod to my past and a wink to the future.
Well, and if you were to pick maybe one of those words that you just said, how would you break down further what one of those words mean to you?
Right. So activist, right? Being active in the reality that is mine, but then also shared as a culture, right? Seeing the things that feel like they resonate in a positive way and throwing my energy to keep those things harmonious. Finding the things that maybe are disharmonious, that aren't resonating well, and being active in my efforts to make them better. Just being present in this reality, but not just subject to this reality.
That's what's up. I appreciate that. One of the things I do is I facilitate a lot of workshops and stuff like that. And I try to get people to break down the words they use. Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, when you ask people to break down a common word they use, like activism, they're like, but you're like on it. You're like, oh, okay, activism, boom. So what was your journey? What brought you to like the words you use, what they mean when you use them? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. So I do a lot of arts and education, and my given profession, the art that I feel like I work to be special at, is poetry, right? And the English language is a blessing and a curse in that way. As an artist, I feel like it's a great palette for me. It's the largest palette out of all the modern languages. The English language has 500,000 words, right? The active American has a vocabulary of 30,000 words. Out of 500,000, the average American knows 30,000. As far as active vocabulary, it's 10,000. So it distills down even more. Like, not like words that you know what they mean, but like words that you actually use a lot. And so I feel like being precise in my word choice is very important. One of my writing idols is Amy Lowell, and in her Images Manifesto, she talks about the key to poetry is using the exact word, not the near exact, but merely the decorative. And so I feel like understanding words, having a love for words, is one of the first important things that anybody that aspires to be a poet can hope to do.
What do you think would be a consequence of not using your words exactly, or not being aware of the words you're using? Why does it matter?
So it's two different things that can happen if you're imprecise with your words. You can be misunderstood, or you can be disingenuous, Like, I think about how many people reject poetry as an art form, regular people, carpenter type people, blue collar type people. They're like, you know what, I'd rather just watch, whatever, right? Because they've come into these poems in their life where it's like, the majestic, beatific, golden orb floats yonder over horizon. When you're like, man, it was sunset, or it was sunrise. Like, you're being disingenuous with your words because you're choosing words that sound more important than they are. It paints this picture but it paints kind of like a really kind of elitist picture that maybe is not the tone for what you're trying to do. The other thing is you can be not descriptive enough. Oh man, God, man, that day was pretty. Or I like that album. That album was interesting, right? Interesting actually is like a play saver word for me. It's my go-to, right? So if you ever ask me like, oh man, you feeling my album? Oh man, it was interesting. And, you know what I'm saying? Like that's like, all right, like, it's like, well, if I say that, it probably meant something like it was close to like trash.
Oh.
It was kind of like not great, Oh, it was interesting, it was a lot to ponder,
But I'm hearing tone of voice counts too, because you're like, that was interesting versus
right. Absolutely. Well, but if it's like that for me, it's gonna be a better word than interesting. Like, oh my God, dude, like your wordplay was really fresh, man. I dug the metaphor, the symbolic use of like how you set up this mood. Like I'm there if I'm really into it. But interesting is like one of those words, 500,000 words, right? This is one of those words. It's like Smurf, right? It means whatever you need it to mean. Like, yeah.
Are you familiar with the book, The Four Agreements?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, be exact. Yeah.
And for those who haven't heard of this book, it's a life-changing book for me at least. And one of the first agreements is be impeccable with your words.
Yeah, absolutely. Super critical. Super.
So how'd you get into all the ways you could express yourself? How did you get into it being poetry?
I find that's always an interesting story, especially when it talks about when we talk about intersections, how they all connect, right? So we had an artist in education at the school that I went to, which was in the south suburbs of Chicago. And one of the things that they did was they brought in a poet, and for a month he was resident, wrote every kind of poem that you can imagine, And I just remember, I was already kind of the short, Jewish, odd kid. So it's like, oh my God, man, I'm not gonna write any poems. I'll be even more weird and not popular. But also, I remember distinctly thinking, boys don't write poems. This is not a masculine thing to do. Like how ridiculously, silly a notion that is. As to think that even now that I would understand what masculinity is, but how much less, in fourth grade, what it means to be masculine. And so I just remember really struggling with that as an introvert, but finding that honestly, man, poetry gave me a way to be eloquent in ways that I never could off the cuff. You know what I'm saying? I was definitely not that dude that could just come in and say all of these things exactly. And I didn't want to. I love being an introvert. I love being a people watcher. So poetry gave me a voice without having to have idiocy of that.
That's amazing. Okay, and I like how Moman dropped our theme. So Moman's going to be the feature for the live and online on September 18th, noon Pacific Standard Time, and our theme is intersections. So appreciate you bringing that up. We've been talking about poetry. We've been talking about how great you are at it, and I vouch and I love it. So I was wondering, could you share one of your poems with us so we could experience it firsthand?
Thank you. Yeah. So my newest poem is Oz is a people so magical. They can turn from skin to hashtag in less than the time it takes a police cam to fall. Now, when this happens, it will. Does. There it goes again. Magic. When this happens, see you smile. Rage, but quiet. This is a bully beyond slang. Do not go sacrifice. Do not go fist and hammers. Do not go mouthful of demand and salt. We must go quietly. We must go. See to your senses. Wave at the sun. Wave at your sons. Wave at brown curly hair. Stare at the majesty of your daughters. Kiss them both if they consent. But you must prevent. For a hashtag can never hold this much humanity. And they're holding one for you. Hot and ready like fast food. This is how they slay. They'll call it justice. lemons for lemonade. Now there'll be a video. There's always a video. Do not watch the video. We all know how Lethal Weapon ends. Cry. You have the tears. Love. 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 Even while you hate, even as you are breaking, even as they justify, even as they deny, do not go empty. Even as they pour us out like blood. Ours is a people so magical, we still believe. We hope, pretty as autumn leaves, deep in the falling. Ours is a people so magical that some could sing through slavery. Bravery is Black joy. Black love is Black joy. She is all ours. Watch us wear her like a superpower. Do not go wanting. Drink and be filled. Drink till it spills from your cheeks. Drink until the kill. It is coming. Make peace with that certainty. That with you and the violence meet, you will not go meet. Look into the cameras. Show them the threat of your impotency. There may be some slight discomfort, but it'll all be over soon. Like a magic trick. Poof. It's happened again. Another hashtag is ready.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Mo Man. Very powerful piece. What does that feel like after you perform a poem like that?
A lot of it depends on where I am and who is meant to be my target audience. I live in DC now, which is this hotbed of activism, which is ironic. Most people wouldn't think that. But so I'm up at this open mic with a good friend of mine, Sarah Hernandez, great singer. It's her birthday. So like all of the artists have thrown in and we're all going to her favorite bar and it's an open mic, my homie Amin Dalal is there. So like we're all there and like we're like all of the people of color, like instantly in this place, right? So I'm like, I think this is the day after what happened in Baltimore recently, when the police came in and shot a woman holding her child,
wow,
right, in her own house over a parking infraction.
Wow.
Like, not a felony, not like any type of real thing. Literally, this is a matter of billing, right?
Yeah.
Just like you didn't pay your cell phone, right? Imagine if that same type of impact, And so I was just thinking, like, there's so many names. So many of us are taken by the violence of the state that we live in, right? That at this point, we're all just hashtags. And we're all one decision away from being a hashtag, And so the hashtags become more important than the names and the people. They all end up running together. Like, it's impossible to even keep a list when you know that one person of color is killed by law enforcement every 28 hours. Literally too many people to even keep track of how many people are murdered.
So in an audience, so when you were saying it depends on the
right. So that audience was like overwhelmingly white, right? And so like they see us and like it's like a pin drops in that room, like, oh my God. Like, and you can see for the first time some of them getting it because it's been brought to them and packaged to them in a way that's unapologetic, but still yet and somehow palatable for them, right? And then the next time I did that poem was at the Legends of the South showcase in Decatur for nationals this year, right? Overwhelmingly Black audience because it's the South and it's poetry. And just the energy in the room is electric. It's like, yeah, this is exactly what we've been talking about. Like, speak, you know what I'm saying? Whereas the way I feel is always, it's so symbiotic, right? The energy exchange of poetry, as you know, you're giving energy, you're taking energy. And so it's all completely contingent for me on who am I speaking to? Sometimes the energy I get is that of authoritative, this is something you need to understand. And I have this truth that I'm going to give you. Truth with a small T, not a capital T.
Yeah.
But then, sometimes it's celebratory. Like in a Black audience, people of color predominantly, it's like, this is our thing. This is our joy. Like when the Southerners 150 years ago are like, slavery ain't bad. Look at they're singing and they're dancing, and it's like, man, you just don't understand Black love. It's like we can work throughout all of these things. That does not mean our soul is not heavy.
Yeah.
But it's just something that resonates in our culture. So.
Well, I appreciate you sharing to such depth. I know it's a personal question to ask me. So how do you feel when?
Right.
So I appreciate that. When you're writing a poem, do you picture yourself performing it in front of an audience or this poem is going to be for this person or these people, or is it for you?
Honestly, I've been involved in slam for quite some time, several decades, but I was never the poet that really thought like this poem connects with X, Y, and Z demographics. Absolutely. And these are the people that I'm going to speak to. Absolutely. I feel like these poems are for everybody. I write them as my own form of catharsis, but I feel like they're for everybody. And so I never really was one to be great at. Excuse me. Thank you. I'll take all the blessings I can get.
Yeah.
I was never really one to be like, okay, this is the poem for the fellas, right? Like that's an unapologetically Black poem, but I don't see that poem as just for Black people. There are things that Black people need to get from that poem. There are things that white people need to get from that poem, So for me, my audience, I tend to think about my audience as all of us. I write to my own aesthetic, and so in that way, I can say I'm writing for me. But for all of the people that are like, I write for me, then why publish? Like, there's no need. You're already a perfect writer. If you're writing for you and you like it, that's all you ever need.
That's a deep little part to add right there. I'd like for somebody to be in the room who's like, I want to add to that. I like to write for me and
right. I write for everybody. I write for the Nobel laureates. I write for, what I'm saying?
Yep.
The National Academy of Poetry, everybody, my poems.
I notice if I try to write with the end in mind, like if I try to write, like, I'm going to write this poem. So when I perform like in a blank audience or I perform here, like I'm going to perform for the snap. I notice when I do that the energy that allows me to write, like, is like, well, then we're going to kind of let you write this poem by yourself.
Right.
And then the channeling goes away. You know what I mean?
There's absolutely a formula, right? Like there's the formula, there's the cell, which is the first 20 seconds of slam, or, spoken word. There is the turn, there's our climax. There's the catch, the hook. I tend not to like formulas. When I'm one of the writers that can say, like, I've lived, I'm going to use a Dune reference, both in city and siege, right? Like, so, like, I do work in the literary world. I also do work in the spoken word world, and they're more and more, they're intersecting, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's great. But I tend not to think about, like, the prize. Like, I want everybody to clap right now, or I want everybody to laugh right now. Or, you know what I'm saying? I write to the where the poem, I try to let the poem. And that's, think about even process. Like, I remember when in my early writing career, I used to write mostly by hand. And nowadays I type because I can type so much faster than I can write. Right? So I can keep up with the flow of the poem as it's coming to me. When I'm writing the poem, I'm so exacting because my penmanship is garbage, right? So I'm like trying to write slower so I can read it later, and I'm losing the poem. So my poems are very different back then.
Man, so many things I want to jump off of on there. How technology has changed our communication and way of thinking.
Right.
So many things. But I do want to just like magnify one sentence you said where you said, I don't write for the prize.
Right.
That was powerful, and I think that's, what I do as an educator is I'm working to teach other educators process over product.
Right.
That rather than the product is the most important thing. I tell groups that, like, if we were to like do a team builder together and complete the team builder, the completing it isn't what changes the world. The process is how we treated each other during it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, and again, right, we live in a capitalist society, so everything is product, product, product. You know, and the literary world is no different, which is ironic because poetry doesn't sell. So I don't understand why like there's such an emphasis on, you know, these kind of things. But think about like if you judge yourself by those standards, you'll never be happy ever.
Yeah.
But if you think about like historically, right, like Edgar Allan Poe, who was arguably the Shakespeare of American literature, if you look at his impact doing creative writing, critical theory, reviewing, inventing the detective story, so much poetry, right? He was broke. He was not financially successful. You know, Emily Dickinson in her lifetime was never published, right? And so like when you think about these kind of standards that we put on ourselves, like, oh my God, I'm 26 and I don't have a book out yet. I'm a failure. And it's like, dude, slow down. It's okay. You got time, you know? Man.
I saw when I was like 22 and Ivan Van Sertima, that came before Columbus. I heard a lecture by him and he was talking about, you know, I've studied empires like the Moors, and I can tell you that stop believing that if you're, by the time you're 30, you haven't completed anything, that life is over. Like Moses didn't see the burning bush till 40, didn't,
right?
You know, Red Sea till 80, like you got time. Okay.
Hey, you got time, man.
I even think of like when I watch a TV show and I see an actor who like became a breakout star as a 70-year-old actor on the show.
Right.
Like that person had to work at their craft every day until they were 70. And then
Right.
like now they're a household name. Like you never know when your time is going to come.
And, you know, even in the world of acting, you know, like to think about Samuel L. Jackson, who has been in thousands of movies,
Yeah.
you know, and was in just so many bit roles, character acting until he became, he probably had been in 500 films before he was given a starring role. I mean, he was definitely late 30s, probably early 40s before he became the Samuel L. Jackson. You know?
Exactly. So you think you could, I think this is a good time. You want to share with us another poem? Honor us with that?
Let's see. Give me a second. Okay, so there's another piece that I've been working on. And it's dealing with my understanding of the fragility of life, right? Most of the people that know that I have a very complicated relationship with my family, and that's really about as much as I'll say as far as that goes. And so, like as an adult, the thing that I've tried to do is reconcile myself more with their understanding of what they were trying to do as far as their life goes. While understanding also how it affected me, you know. So this poem is Missing Period. In my beginning, there was Black culture. There was an overriding. There was familial pride. There was everything except acceptance. Yet abortion was a topic too toxic for honest discussion between two cheaters caught between a cuckold and one plus sign, too many. I am an ugly preterition. I am cursed with knowledge. I am where my siblings stayed. I am in a place that should have never been home, but what if we only built toys we wanted the world to see? Instead, I am a war on women. I am shaped ammunition. I am stuck inside. I am complication itself. I am pregnancy barely fitting in the craw of my mother's mouth. She knows she should have aborted. She fears an angry God. As if I'm not a set of blocks that was always hers, to topple, to break, to reimagine. All the girls are doing it. Better a harsh swallow, too taboo for the times, than a growing pile of evidence forcing a few out. Consequence is subtracting periods. Consequence is when questions remain. How much better a removal of me? how often we hide our problems, how often we keep it all tucked in, how readily we pray for grace, how readily we love the sinner but ignore the sin. In the operating room, her heart stopped as her body stayed committed to correcting my mistake, committed to a simple celled sacrifice as a scalpel carved a path for me to climb out. All I know is enduring. I crawled to breath and consciousness, already crying, choked by the unrelenting cage that held me, refusing to surrender its grasp around my throat. I stand here, midget mess. I stand here, miraculous mistake. I stand here, sobbing survivor song. I stand here, confessing ineptitude for extinction. I stand here alive. Black kids learn early. Every day is a fight to the death. Often, the only way to stay alive is to keep.
Wow. Another powerful. That was so powerful, my man. I appreciate you being feeling safe enough to share that. I appreciate that. You know, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's just one of those things, right? Where like people don't always think about impact of life, right? Like when we talk about what freedom is, I understand no matter what else the relationship between my mother and myself is, her having me impacted her life in a way that at least financially was detrimental, socially was complicated. It brought her into a different station than she was before me. These are things that I did to her without ever asking to do them, without, and so like whatever else our relationship is, these are things when we talk about intersections where I have to think about the ways that I impacted her life, before I can even get into the ways where she has impacted mine, yes, for positive or negative.
That's powerful. Is there a line in the poem that sticks out to you more than others?
I think about what it is to be a survivor, right? Like that word takes up space in our, especially activist circles, and is normally kind of just applied in one aspect. When if you're thinking about intersections of oppression, understand that everyone that has a marginalized identity is surviving in spite of a majority culture that would rather see you not, like if we're just being all the way honest. And so that's it. I stand here sobbing survivor song.
That's powerful. Thank you, Mo man.
Thank you.
What do you think about art as a tool for processing? Do you think that it is
right?
Fun?
So like I'm a broke poet. I try to do what I can. But I definitely can't afford therapy. As helpful as that would probably be for everybody living in Western culture, right? Medicine and the hierarchization, the hierarchical nature of like who is allowed access to therapy, as is dictated by the worth of you, represented by how much wealth you have. It becomes this thing, and that I don't have that. And so for me, writing is normally what I utilize to process the world around me, how I come to terms with the world around me, the thing that gives me the opportunity to ask questions, both safe and unsafe, to assess my reality.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a director of a nonprofit. It's been around for 30 years called Free Arts. And that's what we do. We work with young people who have experienced trauma, abuse, neglect, and we do creative arts with them.
Right.
One of the places we do that is in child dependency court. There's usually about 2,000 people that pass through a day, most of them kids who have had a crime committed against them from an adult. And you just see them go from like all in themselves to like art. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. Because, at first you feel like you're going to be judged. It's like when I was talking about being a youngster, it's like, man, I'm already weird enough. I don't need to be the poet too. Like that's because you see that as weird before you ever see it as cool, or at least I did. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh wait, no, this is actually kind of dope, So like, Yeah, art absolutely is a great mechanism. And poetry in particular is great for kids because it allows them voice. And so often, voice is exactly the first thing that we take from our youth.
Yep.
Come in, be quiet,
Yep.
don't talk unless your hand is raised, and I address you, I acknowledge you. So what happens when people that have these implicit biases that even they themselves may not understand never call on? They don't want to hear what you got to say. You know, you're told your voice has no meaning, no worth, no relevance, you know, which by proxy then becomes you have no meaning, no relevance, you know. So poetry is that first brush that allows people the ability to paint their reality. I personally love poetry as that means of explication of self.
Exactly. I agree. And you can tell that, you know, people like Brene Brown, she's researched 13,000 people, and she found that over half of them have experienced shame at a time in a learning environment. And out of those, that percentage, 70% of it was in a creative environment. So right away, you're told you're not an artist, and you know that it shows up because when I do art with adults, every single time the first thing they tell me is, "Oh, I'm not an artist," and it's like fear. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and it never goes away. I mean, I remember in college, right? I had already been a spoken word artist for close to a decade before I went back to college as a returning student, got a degree in English and creative writing, you know, and just the battles I, as a very political Black Southern man, had to deal with a very apolitical, white, established poet who sought to undermine my voice from the very beginning of the class, not to refine it, not to make it more even passable by his eyes, just absolutely being told this is not art, you know? And it's like, dude, you don't get to validate or invalidate my art. You're here to help me shape this art. And that's just so, like, even from a professional point of view, all the way in college, you have people telling you you're not this thing, you know, and that never goes away. And poetry's so tough, man, especially in the literary tradition where you're submitting, you know, like some of the great, I think it was Marty McConnell who once put up her stats about how often she's accepted versus rejected.
Wow.
And this is an extremely established poet. And I think it's like 9 times she'll get rejected before she gets a poem in, you know, and this is a very established poet. So imagine now when you're not quite that established and your percentage is more like 1 poem accepted for every 20 times you submit. You're just constantly being told, you know, no, we can't find a place for this poem, which becomes, we can't find a place for your poetry, right? And having to deal with that.
It makes me think of my favorite writer. You know, she wrote a book, and then she sent it to all these publishers, and they all rejected her until I think like 10 or 11, 12. One of them finally said, "I'll publish your book, but you have to promise that you will not quit your day job because you're never going to make a living as a writer." And that writer was J.K. Rowling. That book was Harry Potter.
Right.
So,
I mean, look, and fiction is infinitely more lucrative than poetry, right? But look at how long it took George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones to pop. I mean, that book was written in the 90s, man. I mean, we're talking about almost 30 years has passed, and like it's the biggest thing in the world now. It's New York Times bestseller now, but up until then, like, you know what I'm saying? You're not successful until you are. And even then, from the literary world, there'll be a gang of people like, well, he's not a real writer. He's a genre writer, you know? So
maybe it's a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like in my own life, because I've been, since I heard the band Korn, I'm not sure if you heard of them.
absolutely.
I wanted to be a performer. I was like, I got to do that.
Right.
So every year I was in a band since I was 12. I was like, this is going to be the year I'm famous, you know?
Yeah.
And every year that I look back, I'm like, I'm so glad that I get more time to prepare.
Absolutely. You know? One of the worst things that can happen is fame before you're ready for it, before you know how to deal with it. And fame is a very toxic creature in and of itself because the human psyche is not capable of dealing with being worshipped. The only thing worse than being worshipped is when it goes away, and it always goes away. What happens then, right, when Jonathan Davis is like in Walmart nowadays just making groceries or whatever, God forbid, whatever place he, you know, because like I promise you, there are a lot of people who have no idea who he is. And like, why is this dude got 15 items and the 10 items are less aisle? And it was like, torn. Like, you know who I am? You know what I'm saying? So like, when it goes away, and it always goes away, what happens then to the ego? Like, does the ego contract back into regular humanity, or does it turn into huge, life debilitating paranoia, depression? Like, why am I not special anymore?
Mm-hmm. It's like in personal development trainings that I do, I'm always getting people to reflect upon: are you trying to prove or improve yourself? Are you is it for external validation or an internal journey? You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh man, Mo man, like I wish we could go on for hours. You know what I mean? So let's close out before we have you do your last poem with September 18th at noon Pacific Standard Time. So many people have been telling me, can you translate that for me into my time? So let me help. That's 2 p.m. if you're in the Central Time Zone. That's 3 p.m. if you are in the East Coast. And that's, I believe, 8 or 9 p.m. if you're in London. So would love to have you join us. Our theme is going to be intersections. Mo-Man, could you just speak to a little where that theme came from for you?
So for me, that theme is super duper critical because we just don't always consider where our similarities lie in life. We are all dissimilar in so many obvious ways, but there are connections. Like, no matter how different your life has been from mine, we share the bond of the Western burden of what we would understand masculinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like those are intersections that we have, right? Even though I am not a white woman, right? We'll always have that shared intersection of not being the preferred demographic, right? So there's something that we automatically have in common. I can never be a black woman, right? But at the same time, I understand that like our blackness is going to be the first thing that people see first and foremost. It defines us, right? So these are things that we have in common. And there's intersections between every single human being. And I think that these things become very, very important as an activist when you start to look at the world, because like, how do you move through the world? Like, the weaknesses in feminism are exposed through Black racial work, right? The weaknesses in Black racial work are exposed in femininity. Like, we get to see these places where like these schools of philosophy could expand, could be better, could be more humane to others outside of the demographic. And all too often, without those intersections, all you're doing is trading one oppressor for the other, whether intentional or not. So
that was so powerful. For me, usually I've heard intersections and intersectionality described more as like the way my identities intersect, as opposed to also adding onto that the way you and I intersect in terms of similarities. So I appreciate that perspective. I found I do a lot of professionally, and my passion is, dialogue, getting diverse groups of people to dialogue. And the process that works is first connecting through some similarity and then going into our differences once we see that. And I found that people connect over the most trivial things, like your favorite color or a musician or a favorite food. It's like, okay, I see you now because we both like, Nigerian food. Like, we're now cool. And I'm ready to talk about the differences in our experience based upon race or gender or ability. You know what I mean? So I resonated.
This was good, man.
Where can people find you? How can we get a hold of you?
So, of course, I have work in the internet. Like, you can find one of my earlier sound projects. The Red Pill is on iTunes, Amazon, all of those traditional outlets. It's older work. My activism is better now. It was as good as it could be for that time. But we're always evolving, always wanting to be better. Of course, Mo-Man the Poet on Facebook, on Twitter, all of the traditional outlets. And anywhere where activism is happening, I try to be. So put yourself in that place, and hopefully we'll run into each other.
There we go. I like that. That's the way of saying it. Like, put yourself in that place, and I like that. And just to clarify, MOMAN, the THE poet, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Did you have a website? Is it momanthepoet.com?
I need to get that restored. So it's a work in progress, man. It's a work in progress. I have to love capitalism more than I do, and I just don't. So like there are other things that I can put my money on. I got to be working towards, but you know, some of love is self-love, and so it's something I got to be better at, man. So coming soon.
Okay, there it is. There it is. So are you comfortable with concluding with one more poem?
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is a poem. The poem is Rosewood, and it's very near and dear to me because it deals with intersectionality in a way that lots of people haven't considered. It is, again, intersection of rape culture and race culture. So, and for those of you not familiar with what the Rosewood incident was, I strongly encourage you all to Google, right? So this poem is Rosewood, or Components of a Fairy Tale. Invent hero, real or imagined. Insert damsel, distress not optional. Expose villains. When applicable, add dragons for color. Set in a time long, long ago. Some winter nights in Florida, you see silhouettes gliding over the cypress marshes, barely lit by the glow of slave-souled filled will-o'-wisps. Some say these are the ancestors looking for justice. Invent hero. Call him James. Make him a simple man who works with his hands. Salt of the earth and all the other fluffy words society spends on men who press doubts into a battery of mouth swell. The sadists who are never satisfied just smashing her to submission. Cloak him in white skin. Here, fidelity matters. Insert damsel. Trauma still in bloom on her face. Loose teeth, a gift from clenched fist. She is a shaped ball of hurt and shame, exactly how James has left her. Because on fair skin, when rouge becomes concealer, bruises blossom into conversation pieces. Sometimes survivors are still locked in the castle. The truth doesn't always set you free. Let's say lying is so easy, even a victim. She blamed some black, because this is the South. 24 hours had seen the Knights Parade, banners flying like talons, gripping a spear. Chivalry isn't dead. It does the killing. Insert ancient order of grand dragon. Imagine magic houses built on ground up black boy bones, blended with blood, evidence optional, retribution mandatory, expose villain. Have you ever wondered why orcs always have broad shoulders and brown skin? It's so that you don't flinch when they die. Die they must. Spilt blood makes masters of men. It is the hero's quest, and Rosewood is just another name for the Darklands. Family crest on hoods, enchant the armor. Let's say we gon' get them boys. Let's say any four will do. Ever seen rope tear a throat like a talon? Ever watch a black body become a raisin in sunlight? Ever seen a sun dim from a mountain of white flames burning a nigga city down the soot? Let's say we're saving. Let's say they had it coming. Justice is an angry mob. Let's say we're justified. Let's say we're heroes. Heroes live happily ever after.
Wow. I'm speechless.
It's a major American, maybe not that major, right? But like it was major to Black Americana in the days before segregation, had ended. And to me, I think the Rosewood scenario is a great example about the limitations of race work in and of itself, of rape culture in and of itself, because it showed the weaknesses. This was a woman who was being, domestically abused by her husband. In Southern culture, your neighbors are nosy. They saw her face was all bruised and beat up, and she was bloody. And it would have put her in more danger to say, my husband did this. So she claimed that she was raped by black men.
Mm.
And all of the self-righteous white men, took it upon themselves to teach all them black boys a lesson. And they burned the city of Rosewood to the ground.
Wow. Mm. As you were speaking the poem too, I was like, this is a poem that needs to be studied in every class, because each line, the importance of it and the symbolism, was like breaking it out, like the enter grand dragon, the coat of arms on the hood is like, I wonder if people are catching this. You know what I mean?
Thank you very much.
And the line, chivalry's not dead, it does the killing. I was like, wow, that's a prompt right there, right to this line.
Honor culture around the world is the thing that the patriarchy takes the dearest, right? You will not dishonor me. Think about old Southern culture, dueling culture. You have dishonored me. And so now you're going to take someone's life, right? Like, and this honor culture is very dangerous. It is a huge part of Southern culture, patriarchy as we understand it. And these are the things that we got to think about with chivalry. Chivalry is honor culture, and chivalry doesn't die. Chivalry does the killing. No doubt. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to joining in on the 18th. And man, much continued success. I wish my friends success, because luck is fickle, but success stays.
Hey, I love it. And I highly encourage you to follow Moman on social media. Honestly, your posts, your Facebook posts, to me, I always use an example of when people are like, social media can't change anything. Your posts have changed the way that they've fine-tuned and changed the way I view the world and myself and my role in it. So much appreciations, much blessings. Looking forward to September 18th. Feel free to reach out to us, continue the conversation, post below. As always, wishing you peace and blessings.
Thank you well.